What if the thing you keep ruining is not something you do not want? What if it is something you want so deeply that a hidden part of you has decided it is too dangerous to receive? You say you want love, but when love gets close, you become cold, distracted, suspicious, difficult to reach. You say you want success, but when the door begins to open, you procrastinate, overthink, disappear, or convince yourself you are not ready. You say you want peace, but the moment life becomes quiet, you go looking for something to worry about. And then you ask yourself the same painful question. Why do I keep sabotaging the things I want most? Jung believed that the human being is not one simple self, moving in one simple direction. You're not made of one desire. You're made of many hidden forces. Some are conscious, some are buried. Some want freedom, some want safety. Some want to grow, some only want to keep you from being hurt again. And here is the forbidden truth. There is a part of you that fears your own light, not because your light is bad, not because your dream is wrong, not because love, success, peace, or visibility are dangerous in themselves, but because somewhere in your unconscious, brightness became linked with exposure, receiving became linked with loss. Being seen became linked with being judged. Wanting too much became linked with shame. So when the thing you want most comes close, your soul does not always open the door. Sometimes it locks it. Sometimes it whispers, "Not yet." Sometimes it creates chaos just when alignment begins to appear. And if you do not understand this, you will keep calling yourself lazy, broken, weak, inconsistent, ungrateful, or impossible to love. But self-sabotage is rarely a sign that you do not care. More often, it is a sign that something inside you cares so much it would rather destroy the possibility than risk the pain of losing it later. This is not failure. This is a signal. Your soul is always speaking. The question is whether you are willing to listen. There comes a point in life when you begin to notice the pattern. Not just one mistake, not just one bad choice, not just one relationship that fell apart, one opportunity you avoided, one dream you abandoned, one conversation you never had. A pattern. You get close to something good, and then something in you shifts. You become restless. You begin to doubt. You find flaws in the person who loves you. You find reasons the opportunity is not right. You decide the timing is wrong. You tell yourself you need more information, more preparation, more confidence, more certainty. But beneath all of that, there is fear. A quiet fear, a buried fear. A fear you may not even recognize as fear, because it speaks in such reasonable language. It says, be practical. It says, do not get your hopes up. It says, people like you do not get things like this. It says, if you try and fail, everyone will know. It says, if you let them love you, they will eventually leave. It says, if you become visible, you will be attacked. It says, if you become whole, you will no longer know who you are. And so you pull back, you miss the call, you delay the work, you test the relationship, you hide your gift. You make yourself smaller than the life calling you forward. And the most painful part is that you may not even know you are doing it. You only see the aftermath. You see the missed chance. You see the silence after the argument. You see the unfinished project. You see the person who finally stopped trying. You see the dream that now feels distant, as if it belonged to another version of you. Then shame enters. Shame says, there you go again. Shame says, you always ruin everything. Shame says, this is who you are. But shame is not truth. Shame is often the voice of an old wound pretending to be wisdom. Jung reminds us that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life from behind the curtain. You may believe you are choosing. You may believe you are making rational decisions. But the deeper self may be choosing from memory, from pain, from fear, from an image of yourself that was formed long before you knew how to question it. This is why self-sabotage feels so confusing. On the surface, you want one thing. Underneath, another part of you is working against it. And that hidden part is not your enemy. It is trying to protect you with outdated instructions. It learned somewhere that wanting is unsafe. It learned that being happy makes loss more painful. It learned that being visible invites criticism. It learned that intimacy can become abandonment. It learned that achievement can become pressure. It learned that if you never fully try, you never have to face what it would mean to fail. So the problem is not that you do not want the life in front of you. The problem is that a frightened part of you does not yet believe you can survive receiving it. That is the quiet wound beneath so much self-sabotage. You do not fear failure as much as you think. Sometimes you fear the version of yourself who would exist if you actually succeeded. You fear the responsibility, you fear the visibility, you fear the expectations. You fear the people who may resent your growth. You fear leaving behind the familiar identity of the struggling one, the overlooked one, the almost there one, the one who could have done something great if only life had been different. There is pain in failure, but there is also a strange comfort in it. Failure can become familiar. Waiting can become familiar. Longing can become familiar. Even disappointment can become a kind of home when it is the only emotional landscape you have known for years. And when something better appears, the soul does not always recognize it as rescue. Sometimes it recognizes it as danger, because peace feels unfamiliar. Love feels unfamiliar. Success feels unfamiliar. Stability feels unfamiliar. And the unconscious often chooses the familiar over the good. This is why you can crave change and resist it at the same time. This is why you can pray for an opening and then freeze when the opening arrives. This is why you can say yes with your mouth while your behavior slowly says no. But here is the reframe you need to hear. Your self-sabotage is not proof that you are destined to lose what you love. It is proof that something inside you needs to be met before it can allow you to receive what you love. The thing you thought was your weakness is actually a signal. The delay is a signal. The panic is a signal. The impulse to run is a signal. The sudden numbness when something good happens is a signal. The need to ruin things before they can disappoint you is a signal. It is the soul saying, look here, not out there, here. This is where the wound lives. This is where the old fear still breathes. This is where the next doorway opens. Jung taught us that the answers you seek externally are already within you, but they are not always sitting neatly in the conscious mind. They are often hidden inside symptoms, patterns, dreams, attractions, irritations, and repeated endings. The unconscious speaks through the very things you wish would stop happening. So when you sabotage something, the deepest question is not, why am I so foolish? The deeper question is, what part of me believed this was necessary? What part of me felt threatened by this blessing? What part of me confused receiving with danger? What part of me would rather return to the pain I know than step into the unknown good I claim to want? That question changes everything. Because now you are no longer at war with yourself. You are listening. And listening is where the healing begins. But before you can stop sabotaging the things you want most, you must confront the shadow that has been protecting you in secret. The shadow is not simply the dark side of you. It is everything you had to push away in order to be accepted, loved, safe, or understood. It is the anger you were not allowed to feel, the ambition you were taught to hide, the need you were shamed for having, the confidence someone called arrogance, the sensitivity someone mocked, the desire someone made you feel guilty for wanting. Jung described the shadow as the part of the personality that remains outside conscious awareness. But what remains outside awareness does not disappear. It acts, it leaks, it chooses, it interrupts, it pulls strings from beneath the surface. And when your shadow contains fear of your own light, self-sabotage becomes one of its favorite tools. Because the shadow does not only hold what is ugly, it also holds what is powerful. It holds your courage. It holds your hunger. It holds your boldness. It holds the part of you that knows you are meant for more. It holds the voice that says, I am allowed to be seen. But if that voice was punished, ignored, envied, mocked, or misunderstood, then your own brightness may have been exiled into the shadow. You may have learned to dim yourself before others could dim you. You may have learned to abandon your desire before anyone could reject it. You may have learned to make yourself less remarkable so you would not become a target. Now, years later, you call it humility. You call it realism. You call it being low maintenance. You call it not wanting too much. But sometimes what you call humility is fear dressed in acceptable clothing. Sometimes what you call realism is an old wound making predictions. Sometimes what you call not wanting attention is the memory of what happened the last time you were fully yourself. This is why shadow work is not optional. You cannot step into wholeness while rejecting the very parts of you that carry your power. And here is something most people do not want to admit. You may be more afraid of being whole than you are of being broken. Brokenness has a role. Brokenness explains things. Brokenness asks less of you. Brokenness gives you a story others can understand. But wholeness asks you to stop hiding behind that story. Wholeness asks you to become responsible for your gifts. Wholeness asks you to let yourself be loved without constantly testing whether love will leave. Wholeness asks you to walk through the doorway instead of standing forever at the threshold, analyzing the frame. That is why the shadow resists. Not because it hates you, because it does not trust the new life yet. Jung urges us to bring the hidden into consciousness not so we can condemn it, but so we can reclaim the energy trapped inside it. Every rejected part of you carries energy. Every fear you refuse to look at becomes a guard at the gate of your future. Every desire you shame becomes distorted and returns in disguised ways. If you shame your ambition, it may return as jealousy. If you shame your need for love, it may return as emotional distance. If you shame your creativity, it may return as criticism of people who dared to create. If you shame your desire to be seen, it may return as resentment toward those who stand in their own light. This is the shadow speaking. And it is not asking to be worshipped. It is asking to be integrated. Integration means you stop pretending you do not want what you want. You stop mocking your own longing. You stop shrinking your dream so it will not embarrass you. You stop calling your fear wisdom. You stop confusing the familiar cage with safety. You begin to say, there is a part of me that is scared, and I will not let that part drive my life in secret anymore. That is the beginning of freedom, not perfection. Freedom. Because the goal is not to never feel the old fear again. The goal is to recognize it before it takes the wheel. The goal is to notice when you're about to sabotage love and pause long enough to ask, what am I protecting myself from? The goal is to notice when you're avoiding your work and ask, what would success require me to become? The goal is to notice when peace feels boring and ask, what chaos did I mistake for aliveness? This is how you begin to release the old pattern. Not by attacking yourself, not by forcing confidence, not by pretending you are healed, but by releasing the identities that made sabotage feel necessary. You may need to release the identity of the one who is always almost ready to start, almost ready to love, almost ready to be seen, almost ready to change. Almost ready is a comfortable prison. It gives you the feeling of movement without the risk of arrival. You may need to release relationships that only know how to love the smaller version of you. This is painful, because not everyone who knows your past will know how to bless your becoming. Some people are comfortable with your wounds because your wounds keep you predictable. They know how to relate to you when you doubt yourself. They know where you fit when you are apologizing for your needs. They know how to stay powerful when you are unsure of your own voice. But when you stop sabotaging yourself, the entire arrangement changes. You become harder to control. You become less available for emotional crumbs. You become less willing to perform weakness so others can feel strong. And some people will call this arrogance. Some will call it distance. Some will say, you have changed. And the truth is, you have. You have changed because you finally stopped mistaking self-abandonment for love. Jung believed that the path toward wholeness requires courage because it separates you from the false self you built for survival. That false self may have protected you. It may have helped you belong. It may have kept you safe in rooms where your truth was not welcome. But a shelter can become a prison when you are no longer in danger. Letting go does not mean hating the version of you who survived. It means thanking that version, then refusing to let survival remain the highest form of life you allow yourself. Letting go is a doorway, not an ending. You're not losing yourself. You're losing the parts that were never truly you. The compulsive pleasing, the hiding, the shrinking, the need to ruin things before they can ruin you. The belief that disappointment is safer than hope. The belief that if you stay small, you stay protected. But smallness is not protection anymore. It is exile, and your soul knows it. That is why the old life feels tighter than it used to. That is why certain conversations drain you faster. That is why old distractions no longer numb you the same way. That is why the same patterns now feel unbearable. Your deeper self is withdrawing its permission. It is saying, I cannot live like this anymore. I cannot keep destroying what I secretly pray for. I cannot keep calling fear discernment. I cannot keep running from the very light I ask to receive. And when you begin to listen to that inner voice, something strange happens. Life begins to answer differently. Jung described synchronicity as meaningful coincidence, the mysterious alignment between the inner world and the outer world. And when you stop betraying your own becoming, you may begin to notice these quiet alignments, not as spectacle, not as fantasy, but as a subtle recognition. You think about leaving an old pattern, and a conversation appears that confirms what you already knew. You finally tell the truth to yourself, and a door opens that had been closed for years. You stop chasing what rejects you, and something calmer begins to move towards you. You choose not to sabotage the opportunity this time, and the next step appears with unusual timing. This is not because life suddenly becomes easy. It is because your inner world has stopped sending mixed signals. For years, you may have said yes with your desire and no with your behavior. You may have asked for change while clinging to the identity that made change impossible. You may have wanted love while protecting yourself from being known. You may have wanted success while staying loyal to a story of inadequacy. But when the inner contradiction begins to heal, the path begins to feel less divided. Your choices carry a clearer signal. Your relationships reveal themselves more quickly. Your body tells the truth more loudly. Your intuition becomes harder to ignore, and synchronicity appears not as a reward, but as a mirror of alignment, a mirror of the moment when the soul and the life begin moving in the same direction. Still, you will be tested. Do not romanticize the path. The old pattern will not disappear just because you understood it once. There will be moments when the thing you want comes close and the old fear rises again. You may feel the impulse to disappear. You may want to start an argument. You may suddenly decide the dream is foolish. You may feel tired exactly when discipline matters most. You may become strangely numb right before intimacy deepens. This does not mean you are back at the beginning. It means the threshold is real. Jung reminds us that the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. But the cave is not only pain, memory, or grief. Sometimes the cave is joy. Sometimes it is love. Sometimes it is the terrifying possibility that you are more capable, more luminous, and more ready than your old identity can tolerate. That is the fear of wholeness, not fear of being damaged, fear of no longer being able to use damage as your only definition. And when that fear comes, you must learn to pause. Not collapse, not obey. Pause. Let the fear speak, but do not let it make the decision. Ask it what it remembers. Ask it what it is trying to prevent. Ask it how old it is. Because often the part sabotaging your present is not the adult you are now. It is a younger part of you still standing in an old room, still hearing an old voice, still expecting the same rejection, the same humiliation, the same loss. That part needs your presence, not your contempt. It needs to learn that you are no longer powerless. You can be seen now and survive. You can be loved now and remain yourself. You can succeed now and still belong to your own soul. You can receive now without waiting for punishment. You can become whole without betraying where you came from. This is the work. Slow, honest, repeated. You catch yourself earlier. You repair faster. You tell the truth sooner. You stop turning every fear into a prophecy. You stop abandoning the path at the first sign that it matters. And the more you practice this, the more you realize that self-sabotage was never your deepest identity. It was a defense. It was a language. It was the wounded soul saying, I am afraid this will hurt. Once you understand the language, you no longer have to obey the pattern. You can respond. You can place a boundary where you once created drama. You can speak a need where you once withdrew. You can continue the work where you once invented reasons to stop. You can let someone love you without forcing them to prove it through endless tests. You can let life become better without immediately searching for the hidden trap. This is where boundaries become sacred. A boundary is not a wall against love. It is a doorway that teaches love how to enter properly. When you have lived through disappointment, you may confuse openness with danger. So you either expose everything too quickly, or you shut everything down. But a boundary gives you another way. It says, I can remain open without abandoning myself. Jung taught us that the soul speaks in symbols, dreams, tensions, and repeated patterns, but it also speaks through the body, through tightness, through relief, through the strange heaviness you feel around certain people, through the calm that arrives when something is true. The more you stop sabotaging yourself, the more you will need your intuition, because the old life will still call. The old people may return. The old habits may look comforting. The old identity may whisper, "Come back. You knew how to survive there." But your intuition will whisper something quieter. You do not live there anymore, and you must learn to trust the quieter voice. Some relationships will evolve when you do this. Some will deepen because they were always waiting for the real you to arrive. Some will soften because you stop demanding that they carry the weight of wounds you had not yet faced. And some relationships will end, not because you failed, because the contract was built around your self-abandonment. When you stop sabotaging yourself, you stop participating in certain silent agreements. You stop agreeing to be less honest. You stop agreeing to be less gifted. You stop agreeing to be endlessly available. You stop agreeing to confuse intensity with intimacy. You stop agreeing to mistake being needed for being loved. This will feel lonely at first. Every threshold does. But loneliness is not always a sign you are on the wrong path. Sometimes it is the space between the life that required your shrinking and the life that can finally hold your truth. And in that space, new people appear. People who do not need you wounded to feel close to you. People who are not threatened by your light. People who can meet your boundaries without punishing you. People who recognize your becoming because they are becoming too. This is the aligned life beginning to form. Not perfect, not painless, aligned. And alignment does not mean you never feel fear. It means fear is no longer the hidden architect of your life. It means the frightened part of you is heard but not obeyed blindly. It means your shadow is no longer locked in the basement, pulling wires in the dark. It means you are becoming conscious of what once controlled you. And when that happens, synchronicity often returns with greater force. Not because you are controlling life, because you are finally participating with it. You may notice the right book appearing at the right time, the right conversation arriving when you almost gave up, the sudden ending that makes room for the beginning you could not have planned, the person who enters with calm instead of confusion, the opportunity that matches the version of you who chose not to run this time. Jung believed that the inner and outer worlds are more connected than the modern mind wants to admit. When you change your relationship with the unconscious, you change your relationship with reality itself. You stop living as a divided person. You stop asking life for one thing while proving through your choices that you expect the opposite. You become clear, and clarity has power. The soul begins to signal through peace instead of crisis, through recognition instead of chaos, through quiet openings instead of repeated collapse. This is what becomes possible when you stop sabotaging what you want most. You do not become someone else. You become less divided, less ruled by old fear, less loyal to the wound, less willing to destroy your own doorway because crossing it feels unfamiliar. You begin to understand that the thing you wanted was never just the relationship, the success, the peace, the calling, or the visible life. What you wanted was the version of yourself who could receive it without running. That is the deeper initiation. To become the person who can hold what your soul has been asking for. To become the person who does not confuse light with danger. To become the person who can stand in the doorway and step through. So the next time you feel the old impulse rise, the impulse to withdraw, delay, test, criticize, numb, vanish, or ruin what is beginning to bloom, do not immediately believe it. Pause, listen, ask what it is trying to protect, then remind it gently, we are not there anymore. We do not have to destroy this to survive it. We do not have to run from our own light. We can receive slowly. We can remain present. We can become whole. If these words found the part of you that has been quietly fighting your own becoming, write the word signal below. Let it be a small act of honesty. Share this with someone who keeps ruining what they secretly pray for. And if you are ready to keep listening to the deeper voice within you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not lose the thread when your soul speaks again. Because your soul is always speaking. And the life you want most may be waiting for the moment you finally stop running from your own light.